If you're a B2B business owner, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why you being a guest on the top-ranked podcast in your specific niche is the number one thing you need to do in order to generate qualified leads that come to you rather than you always going to them and relying on cold outreach and referrals in order to get your next client. Now, if you're new here, I'm Devin Rodriguez, founder of podcastguest.io, and all we talk about on this channel is how to use podcast, and more specifically, being a guest on the top-ranked shows in your niche in order to generate qualified leads for your business and all of the best practices that come along with that. Now, if you're a B2B business owner, I know a couple of things about you if I just had to take a guess. You're probably at the place right now where your business has done extremely well. But on one end of the equation, it's done great up until this point, but you also have a vision of where you could take the business. And truthfully, probably the gap that exists between A and B is the fact that you probably don't have a predictable client acquisition system right now, because you've probably built your business by referrals and word of mouth up until this point. I mean, those are the best leads that are known to man because they have such a high level of trust. But the only downside is it kind of probably feels a little bit unpredictable. And you know you can't get to that next level of business because you know that what took you here isn't going to take you there. Like, referrals are great, but you don't know when the next referral is coming. So it kind of makes it seem a little inconsistent and kind of like a roller coaster on some months. And on the other end of the equation, you're probably doing a lot of cold outreach, or you're probably doing a lot of content on places like LinkedIn where you're trying to get in front of that decision maker. But ultimately, that's probably one of the biggest problems that you've been having is you have your LinkedIn presence, but you haven't really been able to quite crack it. In other words, you're getting engagement, you're getting comments, you're getting likes, but none of that is really converting into new business. Now, the cool thing for you is you have a very high lifetime value of a client. So you're talking 40, 50, upwards of a couple $100,000 that if you just get one client, that turns into something that is substantial. But right now, you're facing a couple of different things. Number one, there's a very low level of trust in the market. So whenever you do reach out to somebody or somebody does book a call, it sounds good, but the thing that inevitably pops up in their mind is, okay, but how is this different from the things I've done in the past? And there's a very low level of trust, which usually manifests itself in things like longer sales cycles, colder leads, higher cost, lower margins, and ultimately it kind of feels like you're having to pull teeth a lot of the time. And you probably say things to yourself like, why don't they get it? Why don't they see how much different that I am from everybody else in the marketplace? And inevitably, you know, the one thing that you need to do is educate your market, because that is going to be the thing that increases the level of trust that they have with you. The reason why you love referrals is because they already come pre-sold on working with you. It's the easiest lead of all time. But when you deal with a cold prospect, they don't really understand the things that you do. Now, here's the thing I know about you. You're trying to reach some sort of decision maker. Maybe that's a CEO, VP of sales or marketing, CMOs, CIOs, CTOs, you fill in the blanks, CFOs. And it's really interesting because although these people have one job, which is to ultimately grow the business, they also have a very low risk tolerance because they know that if they invest into something using company dollars and it doesn't work, who does it ultimately fall back on? It usually falls back on them. So with that being said, before they ever make a decision, they have to be extremely certain that the decision that they do make is the right one. So what does that mean? Trust needs to be built before you ever speak to that person. Now, what ends up happening is you're doing all of this cold outreach, you're doing all of these things, but you're not building trust because you're not reaching people and meeting them where they are. Well, what I mean is that whenever you send a DM or a cold email or you're posting a piece of content, you're just showing up on somebody's feed randomly. They didn't choose to be there receiving that piece of content. So even if they do get it, they don't really consume it or they don't really care about it. Number one, because they're being inundated by so many other people in your industry that they don't know who's who and what's true. But also number two, it's like, I just saw this post. Let me just swipe to the next one. See, the reason why I know you need to be a guest on podcast, if you are specifically a B2B business owner, is first and foremost, there's a crazy statistic out there that says that 83% of business executives and senior leaders listen to podcasts at least one time per week. And some research actually suggests that business leaders and senior executives listen to about 54 minutes of strategic audio content, AKA podcast, every single day, which means that when you appear as a guest on a podcast, you are literally placing yourself in front of the people that you are trying to reach. But you're doing it in a way where they showed up ready to learn, to solve the problems that they have and ultimately reach the goals that they're looking to achieve. So with that being said, when you show up on a podcast, as opposed to doing cold outreach or content or having to rely on the next referral that you don't know when is coming, you know that when you show up on a podcast that is in your specific niche, that there are the people that you're looking to reach. They're there. They just don't know about you. But the biggest thing is this. I speak with business owners all of the time, and I hear it continuously. It's hard to reach the decision maker, getting past the gatekeeper. I want to speak directly to the person that could cut me the check because that's going to dramatically decrease how long my sales cycle is. See, when you go on a podcast and you speak directly to the person that can sign the dotted line and cut you the check, you cut out all of the middlemen in the equation. You don't got to go through all of the hoops. Sure. Will you still have a call or 2 calls or however many it could be? Yeah, sure, of course you're gonna. But you're gonna dramatically reduce that sales cycle because now you are speaking directly to the person that makes the final decision. Versus on the other end of the equation, how many times have you been in the seat where you've been hopeful speaking to somebody that said, okay, I'm gonna tell XYZ person or I'm gonna communicate to that person, and then they inevitably end up ghosting you. Why do they do that? Well, very simply, they end up ghosting because the business leader got the information and they played a game of telephone where the person got the info, but then they only heard the price and they said, I don't need that. They didn't understand the value of what it is that you were offering. So when you appear as a guest on podcast, you're getting in front of the people that you are ultimately looking to reach. And you're doing it in a way where there's very high levels of intent. Like as an example, let's say you did lead generation for some type of company and you got on a B2B podcast that was all about lead gen. Well, you know that anybody that's listening to that podcast is interested in generating more leads for their business. How much higher intent of a lead could you ask for than getting in front of somebody that has the problem that you quite literally solve? So now you're going to have 45 to 60 minutes to educate that person on what you do, why it's different from everything that they've tried, why the things they've tried in the past didn't work, and why your thing is ultimately superior. But you're not doing it in a way where it's like salesy, where you're saying,
oh, these are the things you've done in the past, and this is why it doesn't work, and this is why you have to hire me, and this is why. No.
When you apply the contrast framework and principle, which is something we've talked about on this channel before, and you say, hey, here's the things that most companies do when it comes to generating leads. They rely on cold outreach. Cold outreach is great because it allows you to be very targeted and it's free, but it's also bad because people are burned out. See, the thing that most people need to start doing when it comes to lead generation is XYZ, fill in the blank. So with that being said, you allow that person that you are looking to reach, you're getting in front of that business owner, but you're getting in front of that business owner in a way where you're able to persuade them. You're able to give them all of the information that they would need on the first, second, or third call with you. You give it all to them before they ever enter your sales process. So now imagine how more likely this person is to become a client faster, simply because they have all of the education before they ever speak to you. So now what ends up happening is you don't have to spend time trying to convince or get them to see why you're different, or end up saying to yourself, why don't they get it? Why don't they see how much different we are? Because you just got done for 45 to 60 minutes clearly explaining what you do, why it works, how much different it is. So the reality of the situation is when it comes to getting in front of these leaders and these executives or whoever it is specifically for you in your B2B environment, is the only way to increase certainty is to decrease risk, because they're really two sides of the same coin. But the only way you increase certainty is through education, because that education is going to build trust. Now, here's the thing. The people you work with, they probably working with someone right now for the specific thing that you have. So we all know that most people in a B2B environment, they have a vendor of some sort. But the only reason that they don't leave that vendor, and the reason why most people stay with the same vendor for so long, is because they don't know that a better option exists. Sure, they get DMs, they get hit up via cold outreach, and they probably respond to you with things like,
sorry, I already got somebody that covers XYZ for me.
The reason why they don't engage is because they don't understand how you're different. But when you go on a podcast, what ends up happening is you're clearly able to articulate how much different you are from their current vendor. So what ends up happening is you're able to siphon clients from other vendors because you've clearly differentiated yourself from all of the other vendors and things that they're currently doing or have done in the past. So now ultimately you become their guy. where in their mind, you clearly articulated the problems they have, the negative consequences that those problems have led to, how those things have not allowed them to get to their dream outcome. And now they say, oh yeah, Devin's the guy that I need to hire in order to get to where I want. He is the person for me. They have a very high level of certainty inside of their mind because of the education that you provided them before the sales process. So now the sales cycle that you had that took forever gets dramatically cut shorter because of the level of trust that they have with you prior to that sales conversation. So number one, allows you to get in front of your ideal client, the decision maker, in a format where they're showing up because they want to. You're not hitting them with an ad. You're not hitting them with a cold email. They're showing up on podcasts because they're looking to grow their business. They just don't know that you have the solution that they can implement inside of their business. Number two, you're building peak levels of trust simply because you're educating that person in a very low risk environment. You're not asking them for money. You're not asking them to cut you a check. You're just showing up in front of them on the podcast that they chose to listen to. And for 45 to 60 minutes, you're articulating back to them the problems they have, the things it's led to, the things they tried in the past, why those things haven't worked, and the better vehicle that they need to use in order to get those results, which is the thing that you have. So now, even if they're working with a vendor, they leave that vendor, they will come to work with you because they clearly see how much different you are. But not only that, you're not going to get as much price resistance because there's so much belief installed that person before the sales process. And you're going to have your sales cycles cut dramatically shorter simply because of the level of belief that they have with you before that conversation. So I'll end on this. I had a prospect on a call with me once. He said, Devin, listen, I just want to fish where the fish are. In other words, you wouldn't bring a fishing rod to the desert because you know there are not going to be fish there. Now, when you're doing cold outreach and you're posting content and you're doing all of these different things, sure, you know that there's some of your prospects there. But are you doing it in a way where there's the most leverage? Because here's the reality, even if you're posting content, you're doing cold outreach, you're only reaching so many people and it's all up to you. It's all up to the algorithms. You don't really have control over getting out in front of those people. But when you go on a podcast, you're able to leverage the podcast host audience that has the people that you're looking to reach. So the thing is that the audience trusts that host. And if that host brings you on the podcast, that trust is immediately transferred over to you, which is going to increase the level of certainty that the audience has that your thing is the thing for them. So you don't have to rely on the algorithm or posting and hoping your content blows up or doing a bunch of cold outreach. Sure, still do all of those things. But guess what's going to make all of those things infinitely easier? When people see you on podcast first. Now your cold email doesn't look like a cold email. It looks like an email that they got from somebody that they already saw on a podcast. And now the content you post online, you're able to dramatically increase the amount of content that you're posting, which is going to dramatically increase the number of people that interact with your brand because you have all of the content from the podcast that you're able to deploy. But long story short, if you're looking to get in front of decision makers, do it in a way where you're able to educate them before they ever enter your sales process so that by the time they do, they're pre-sold on working with you. This is the vehicle. Fish where the fish are. Go where your people are spending their time and educate them so that by the time they come in, sales cycle is shorter, you're able to close more, you're able to enroll more clients and do it predictably simply because you're placing yourself in front of the people that cut the checks and sign on that dotted line.